Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So they're making it harder for me to talk because they know I'm right. I want there to be a ceasefire in Iran, and I looked up on AI and they said it's costing somewhere between $30 and $50 billion so far to be in Iran. We could have ended homelessness with my tiny home plan for less than $30 billion. They could have bought various things for the homeless as well, transportation in the form of even buses, what have you. And I told them, I said, you've got to cut the check is a smart thing to do. I've been talking about these things for a long time. In the last 10 years, there have been somewhere around 600 million preventable deaths or more in the world. 30 million of them have been in America. And the social engineers don't care about that. So let me, read Psalm 1 for you real quickly here. There's only 6 verses. Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Now, what's a mocker? A mocker is someone who mocks the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order first and foremost. That includes the churches, the mosques, the synagogues. And the word mosque is similar to the word mox. The word church, right, is derived from Circe, a deity of witchcraft. And we see them dress and behave in a way that is very much similar to sorcerers and witches. So people who make it harder for me to talk so they can then mock me, so they can then pretend that their presentations are better, are extremely disgraced. One of the first things you learn in America is why not to be a white supremacist. And by default, as Jews are often said to be white, why not to be a Jewish supremacist? And also, why not to be an LGBT supremacist? Americans historically said things like, no homo. How are they going to go from that to pretending that it's okay to be an LGBT supremacist? So again, blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers, right? Prospar. This is what happens when the vine is green. What will happen when it is withered? Because people are in the way that sinners take, and they're in the company of mockers, spiritually speaking, in terms of their presence and otherwise. Not so the wicked, they are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. So let's go to Proverbs 10, verses 29 through 32, through the end. The way of the Lord is a refuge for the blameless, but it is the ruin of those who do evil. The righteous will never be uprooted, but the wicked will not remain in the land, in the spiritual land, right? Obviously in Isaiah 57, it says the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. John the Baptist was killed, Stephen the martyr. Of course, Christ was martyred. So it's not talking about the physical earth. It's talking about the spiritual land. Just like the church, they're not talking about any churches on this planet. They're all just government shells. It's talking about an idea of a church in the spiritual realm. The righteous will never be uprooted, but the wicked will not remain in the land. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, but a perverse tongue will be silenced. Going back to Psalm 1. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers, bearing the fruit of prospar, mind, body, soul, spirit. When you think about basketball, for example, name one small forward in the 90s or early 2000s, a shooting guard, a small forward, a point guard, who is an idiot in the NBA. It doesn't exist. Because even with basketball, it takes a certain amount of thinking. With sprinting, you just have to be a natural. You just try very hard and you just run very hard. With basketball, it takes a certain amount of mind-body control and thinking. But with martial arts, it takes much more. In order to be the top martial artist, One has to be more intelligent than everyone else because of the degree of passion that goes into it, because of the degree of mental development and mental prowess, moral, mental, spiritual, and romantic. So bearing the fruit of being the top martial artist ever possible like I have shows that I do not stand in the way that sinners take, and I don't sit in the company of mockers. And mockers and sinners, mockers are forms of sinners, have made it so that due to tech, breeding, cheating, and generational ill-gotten gains, no one will ever be able to one-up me or equal me. And that's because God set me apart to be that. I didn't create myself. God created me. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom. Right? From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom. So how do you become smarter than everyone else? Is you have to be righteous. If one isn't more righteous than everyone else, they're not going to be more wise than everyone else. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom. Proverbs 11:30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. So the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, right? And what fruit comes from the mouth of the righteous? Wisdom. So wisdom is a tree of life. But if one isn't righteous, they're not wise. Wisdom only comes from the actions, from the mind, body, soul, and spirit existence of the righteous. That's where wisdom comes from. Psalm 5:12, for surely you, O Lord, bless the righteous. You surround them with the shield of your favor. Now let's look at Ephesians 5 real quickly here. Let's go to verse 15. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. The next verse, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. So it says, don't live as unwise, but live as wise. And from the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom. So it's saying be morally precise so that you can produce the fruit of wisdom. And that means not taking the way that sinners take or sitting in the company of mockers. You see how it's pretty straightforward. So just like when I outmaneuver them at sparring and hand-to-hand combat, I outmaneuver them when it comes to these arguments. I cite the verse, right? The sword of Scripture. The walking in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice, skywalking, skywalker, sky law core, skywalking, sky law king, the king of kings, the king of walking in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice. And so with the footwork, with the mental development, with the heart, the heart, I outmaneuver the enemies of God, and I strike them to their very core with the sharp double-edged sword of Scripture that's sharper than any double-edged sword. Strike into the very essence of somebody. When they're defeated in that exchange, they're defeated in a moral exchange, which shows that their very way and path and what they've committed to has failed them. Their lack of prioritization has failed them. They have refused to be healed, right? Healed is a play on words for he led. And as they have refused to come into the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, their thinking has failed them. Because it's from the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, but a perverse tongue will be silenced. Silenced how? Herod went on and on, running his mouth. Caiaphas went on and on, running his mouth. Mockers go on and on all throughout history. How are they silenced? They're silenced because they're cut off from the land of the living. And that's what it's saying in Ephesians 5 as well. That is why it is said, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Because those who aren't wise enough to be in the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, the divine order, an order not of race, but I use Africa as a point of reference. It's an order of a specific form of martial arts that has to do with universal pinpoint and moral precision. Falcon, the hawk, spreads its wings by the wisdom of God. It's in Job. The Lion of Judah, right? That fierceness of the lion, that speed of the falcon. But a spirit. I'm not a huge, ripped, strong guy, but I can outmaneuver a huge, ripped, strong guy. Because faster is master. Not necessarily striking faster, but I do strike faster than anyone who's ever lived. You know, when I'm not crippled and fumed and poisoned. But I beat them to the punch. It's clear cut. Proof, pro-of. Profound, pro-found. Procreate in the Creator. So when people are supposed to come into the Spirit of God with their wife and supposed to create a righteous child, right? A procreate. So there's generational righteousness to consider. I mean, they were supposed to do that historically. But what happened is time ran out. Because of tech, breeding, cheating, and generational ill-gotten gain, that time ran out and no one's supposed to have children anymore. And I don't think it's a coincidence the government set the stage for me to move to a place that's 70% black, because they are unbelievably racist. And they want black people to disproportionately get the message. What do you call a group of governing class people who want a race that they don't like for an unjust reason, right? For not a good reason, they don't like them, to disproportionately not reproduce and to try to use Jesus to do so. That's a pure evil group of idiots, right? They're their worst enemies by far. They're not using their heads. They're being played like an idiot by the devil. So as we see the failure of the government, we see the failure of them to understand why there should be a ceasefire in Iran. You know, if the Iranian war goes on for, say, 3 years, 4 years, they might spend another $3 trillion on the war. $3 trillion that they could spend on infrastructure, on housing and food program, on doing an effective healthcare analysis plan to provide healthcare within reason for people, to secure Social Security, so on and so forth. But they don't do that because they're thinking in terms of social engineering and not in terms of righteousness and justice. They're thinking in terms of greed. That's why greed rhymes with seed, and the word greed is like the word Greek. All those Greek sororities and fraternities in college that are similar to the Freemasons and the other social clubs that are notorious for bringing down society. So why did the president even think it was a good idea? Pakistan has nuclear weapons. I'm sure North Korea has something like that. Russia has something like China. So why do they care so much if Iran does? They don't. Part of why they're doing it is so they can make the arguments that there's no money to help the poor, there's no money for food programs, okay, for vets, for things that everyone knows that they should be scrambling to address. And so that's part of why wars are started. Wars aren't just about securing resources abroad. It's not just about war profiteering. It's not just about, false pride, so to speak. It's also about creating the situation where they can argue that there's no money in the budget for social programs that are cost effective. That's why every time they try to have a social program, they make sure it's not cost effective, so they can argue that it's not cost effective anyway. And this has certain social effects. This has certain social, political, and economic ramifications.